Hello and welcome to another instalment of The State of Politics. As per usual, it's myself, Declan, and Patrick joining you this Tuesday afternoon, a very sunny Tuesday afternoon. The world has changed. Well, the UK certainly changed since we last spoke here. We've had a Freedom Day in England and we've had level zero restrictions implemented in Scotland, so a lot to chat about politically. There's been a lot of movement politically in terms of the Prime Minister having to self-isolate after not wanting to at first with a pilot scheme. We've got cases in Scotland going down. We've got the whole debacle around stadiums in Scotland. We've got billionaires getting into space. And we've got another bombshell interview from Dominic Cummings. So, Patrick, it's not been a quiet week. What do you want to kick us off with?
I think you probably have to start with Sajid Javid and the Prime Minister isolating after not wanting to. I mean, I think that was Friday that it was Friday or Saturday was testing positive after visiting a care home on the Tuesday. So I'm hoping he picked it up in the care home and he hasn't been spreading it around the care home, because that would be pretty disastrous. And then, of course, I think it was yesterday, the day before, you had the Prime Minister and the Chancellor trying to get out of isolating. It's another case of one rule for them and another for us, really, isn't it? And
Yeah, and again,
that was
sorry.
on Freedom Day as well. That was when the world wants to open back up and he's having to isolate for a week.
Yeah, one of the questions I was just going to bring up there was, what kind of message do you think that sent to the general public that, yep, take your masks off, run out and enjoy yourself, but yet, here are three of the most high-profile political figures in UK politics having to self-isolate once again. It just shows you, and implements, the fact that the virus hasn't gone away yet and people still need to be careful.
Well, the messages from the government have been pretty consistent throughout the pandemic, and that is one of a shambles. I mean, it started off, we're too late to lock down by 2 or 3 weeks back in March last year, and then you had the Cummings saga visiting Barnard Castle, and that all came out in late May, and then they were again late to lock down for the circuit breaker on Halloween. I think the press conference was actually 3 hours late, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, it's just been a shambles from start to finish from the UK government, so there's no real change there. But yes, I'm sure we'll touch later on how reckless they're being with the Freedom Day.
Yeah, but the incredible thing is, it couldn't have been any more shambolic, but yet anytime we both see a poll on Twitter, the Tories are still well in front, as if, they're untouchable. Yeah, so on that very point, self-isolation, a pilot event, there's been a lot of different pilot events trialled by the UK government, but this one was that because, I think because Johnson had been double jabbed, is that right? That he wouldn't need to self-isolate, is that the case?
I think they're doing a trial where you can still go to work if you're being told to isolate, as long as you test on a daily basis. But after going to work, you can't do anything else. So it's all about getting the economy back up and running, as you would expect with the Tories.
But again, as we know, and in terms of what I've experienced, that you can test negative at first, but then it really comes to fruition. So there is a risk doing this, and again, we know that lateral flow tests are only 75% accurate. So again, there's a big risk in doing this, and it's going to be something that's probably going to be messy as time goes on, because as we said, level zero restrictions in Scotland, no restrictions in England whatsoever. But yet, in terms of hospitality, one of the main sectors which have been really left behind and brutally hurt through this whole pandemic. In terms of staff, when they're having to isolate, it means that restaurants and bars can't open. So, what do you think the path is going to be back for hospitality? This, because even though they can open up under restrictions, if they've not got staff, they can't open up.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult. I think this is probably why everyone thinks the government's opened it up too early, because with not everyone having the vaccine, you still have to isolate. Whereas when everyone's had both doses, and then probably when they've had a booster next year, you can begin to sort of go out even if someone in your house has got the virus, because you're probably not carrying symptoms. You're probably not. You're only going to be spreading it to people who have also been vaccinated. So I think it probably is a bit too early, with only about 60% being double jabbed. But when it comes to the difference in restrictions between Scotland and England, I'm sure everyone will have seen the tweet from, I think it's Liner Train Lines. They're operating on English rules even when they cross the border up to Scotland. So they're having people standing huddled together, no masks, no social distancing, coming off a train in Edinburgh Waverley. The restrictions are actually, you're meant to socially distance 1 metre inside, you're meant to wear a mask. So I think England are moving too quickly out of this.
Yeah, I think again, something that at the start of the pandemic we were trying to tackle this as a Four Nations approach, and obviously we've diverged. But in terms of simple stuff like mask wearing, especially in public transport and whatnot, especially for a company like that, the rules should apply in terms of whenever, as you say, if you want to go by English rules when they're, right up until Carlisle, okay. When that border is crossed and you come into Scotland, I think when one of the first stops is Motherwell, not far from where you live, that is when that should apply at stations and on the train. Yeah, that might sound stupid, but, if it means that when you go into Scotland, everybody in that train needs to put a mask on, then even though they've probably been on the train for such a long period of time, it's something that they're going to need to do. But again, it's consistency in messaging, and it's how companies do that. So that would probably be a silly example. That it would be a lot more sensible for them to look at that and think, okay, it's going to be silly for us to go, 3 hours, 4 hours in a train from London to Carlisle, and then tell everybody then to put a mask on. Keep it consistent, keep it simple. Just keep the mask on, and keep everybody safe and simple, because the final destination is going to be Scotland, and even then, that would even, I think, should apply from Glasgow, Edinburgh to London, or wherever, Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle. But again, it's how the UK again, something politically in terms of the union. We've heard Boris Johnson say there's no border between Scotland and England, but clearly in COVID restrictions there is.
There is anyway. I mean, they are two separate countries that are just part of a political union. I think just going back to that Liner comment, you might say it's logistically quite difficult to organise, but if you know that you're crossing the border from England to Scotland, then you know the restrictions are going to be different. So you shouldn't be selling tickets if you can't abide by restrictions and what is going to be your final destination, Yeah. But on the point there that on the point of the union, it's just another silly comment. I mean, I don't think Boris Johnson or the government puts a lot of thought into the unionist arguments. They just sort of trot out the same old lines, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's not convincing anyone of anything. Nobody actually believes that Scotland and England and Wales and Northern Ireland are the one nation. Everyone knows that it's four separate nations, part of a political union. So, just more silly messaging from the Prime Minister.
In terms of even that as well, if you look at flying, I think if you're to leave, an English-based airport or a Scottish-based airport, masks are still mandatory to be worn on the plane wherever you're going, because you can't say when you get into airspace and start going across the channel, oh, fire on your mask now, guys. It just, it makes no sense. But in terms of mixed messaging, in terms of high-profile figures, again, we're going to see a bombshell interview come out of Laura Kuenssberg with the Prime Minister's former aide, Dominic Cummings. Tell us all the big quote which has stood out so far for you in that interview.
I think the teaser leaked purposely by the BBC was the comment about the Prime Minister back in the 15th of October last year, when they were considering a circuit breaker, was that it was only over 80s that were dying. Only 4% of people in hospital are under 60, and of them pretty much everyone survives. And that I think he might have also said that lockdowns don't work. He doesn't buy into the NHS overwhelmed argument, which was quite incredible considering how many people were in hospital last March and how many people were going into hospital last October when he made that comment.
Including himself.
Indeed. I mean, yeah, he was in hospital in early April, wasn't he? But I mean, if that's what they're leaking, that is probably one of the juicier points in the interview, but I'm sure there's going to be two or three other points he's going to be keen to make. And it's quite funny just how open he's been. I mean, he admits that he shouldn't have been in government. He admits he shouldn't have been a special advisor to the Prime Minister. And he's just sort of willing to sacrifice his reputation as a special advisor, as a political analyst, to basically just expose the government that sacked him. So it's quite funny and it's quite incredible. It's I don't think we've seen anything like this in a long, long time.
No, it's a really good insight into the workings of Number 10 and a good insight into power and control of government, especially through, one of the most serious periods probably since the 1940s during the Second World War. What would you argue back to people that say, Dominic Cummings, a figure who you wouldn't have trusted any time before now. But do you see this as a point of him trying to educate people on what has went on within that building, because the whole story has not been shown or told by anybody else? Or do you see this as just a former aide who is trying to get his own back on the Prime Minister?
I think Dominic Cummings admits himself on his blog that he is a bit of a weird character. He's a bit strange. I think he was actually putting out blog posts saying that Downing Street wanted to hire strange people who think differently and outside the box. And
A government of strange people.
We certainly do, a government of idiots. But I think he's right when he says that about himself, and I think he's doing it just because he wants to. I think he's having a very old time exposing the government for what they are, and it might be a bit of payback, a bit of revenge, but I just think he's having fun doing this, and I think he probably quite likes the spotlight as well. He likes being, an exclusive interview at 7 o'clock at night with the main political editor of the BBC. He likes having 100,000 followers on Twitter. I think he just he enjoys being centre stage.
Thriving off the spotlight, but his former probably best friend, probably no longer, is in terms of this situation before, if especially they turn so much against the Prime Minister, you would expect either that Prime Minister to be, in a situation where his position is untenable, or they'd be heading into another election. Yes, I know it's a long time away, but in a position of, support falling. But that's not happening whatsoever. So, there could be an argument made here that Dominic Cummings is doing more to bring down Boris Johnson. Yes, he's got all the stamina to do so and armoury, than what Keir Starmer's still currently doing at this point in time.
Well, he's not doing anything. That is the big thing. I mean, we've been saying this for weeks. I think people have been saying it for months. He's criticising the government and then giving no alternative. And I think with some of the criticisms he's levelling at the government, they're not hitting and they're not particularly good. I think he went for a photo shoot in April with some wallpaper because the Prime Minister was buying wallpaper through Tory donor funds, and this was his big sleaze argument, and it just didn't break through at all. No one really cared about the wallpaper, and he tried to buy British bonds to help the economy recover. That's not stuck at all. That was ditched within a few weeks. I think news broke today that they're now laying off 90 permanent staff in the Labour Party because they're short of funds. They've only got 1 month's payroll left in the bank. It is quite incredible, just what bad shape they're in. And I think in politics you have to have a message. You have to tell people what you want to do. And I don't think anyone knows what the Labour Party want to do. They want to be in government for government's sake. And I think Boris Johnson's the same. I think Boris Johnson just wants to be Prime Minister, but at least he's got a message and a reasoning behind that. He's a Conservative. He wants to balance the budget. He wants to get Brexit done. Yep. A Unionist as well. Keir Starmer just sort of wants to be Labour Prime Minister for the sake of being Labour Prime Minister, and he's got absolutely no policies that he wants to implement. So what is there to sell?
Yeah, I don't want to go away too much from our conversation around English restrictions just now in Freedom Day, but we were talking about Labour Party there, but we saw something come out, I think it was the end of last week, from Willie Rennie talking about Scottish Labour, and that the Lib Dems would basically do what they did at the very early auspices of the Scottish Parliament, and once again team up with the Labour Party, Scottish Labour Party. Why do you think it's taken them so long to maybe realise that, one of them isn't going to win a Scottish election? The two of them, held power in Scotland for 8 years between them. But surely it's too little too late from both parties. I mean, they're clutching at straws here, really, are they not?
Well, I was a bit confused by the headline because everyone in the BBC debates, apart from Douglas Ross, said that they were willing to work with the SNP because the assumption was, and they were correct, that the SNP would win the election. It was just a matter of how much they would win it by. So they all agreed that they're willing to work together on issues of common ground on a 4-day working week, trialling universal basic income, trying to combat the climate emergency. And there's this headline saying that the Lib Dems and the Labour Party are willing to work together, but they've already agreed to work together along with the SNP and with the Greens. So I don't know if they're going to form a sort of formal coalition, sort of like a pact, an electoral pact, 5 years in advance. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if we've mentioned since last week that Willie Rennie has decided to step down after 10 years as leader of the Liberal Democrats. That's a bit of news as well. And I'm sure his election photo opportunities will be missed by all of us, because it was absolutely comical at times, wrestling sheep and sitting in big beach chairs.
Yep, and playing what's that game called? You know, the thing with the 4 things on it. Big, played a big massive one of them. You know, the thing with the yellow.
Oh, Connect 4?
Connect 4, yeah. He liked a game of that as well, Willie. But
I think he pretended to be a wizard as well once.
Yes, I'm sure he probably did. And that assumption, even if he hadn't done, you could probably believe it, you know. He also pretended to be the leader of a political party, which he didn't do too well at. But yeah, looking at Willie Rennie's legacy as leader of Scottish Lib Dems, obviously been there for a long, long time. Probably likely that Alec Cole-Hamilton is going to get the job. Do you think that Scottish Lib Dems will continue on their usual kind of strong policies on mental health, which is something that they've did for a long, long time in a very positive manner, I must add, but are a different divergence from the way in which Willie Rennie led the Liberal Dems, obviously part of the Better Together campaign, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
In 2014. Yes. Pro-Remain in the EU referendum, but then kind of gave that up, but still anti-Scottish independence. Do you think we'll see any kind of different direction from the Scottish Liberal Democrats if Alec Cole-Hamilton or whoever else gets the job?
Well, hopefully Alec Cole-Hamilton will stop swearing at female colleagues on Zoom calls in committee sessions in the Scottish Parliament, because he famously swore at Marie Todd over a Zoom call, which was incredibly rude and should have been career-ending in my opinion. But he fights on. I think he probably will be the leader. I think mental health is one of their big issues. I know they were the only party that pushed against making Police Scotland one force, as opposed to a more centralised force. Whether they continue that campaign, I don't know. I know the UK-wide Liberal Democrats have given up on Brexit. They say we're not going to campaign to rejoin. They'll definitely still be a unionist party if they're going to be led by Alex Cole-Hamilton. But, I mean, I don't know what the way forward is. I don't think there's a massive electoral coalition for a centrist, liberal, small government party. I just don't think that exists in Scotland anymore. I still think people refuse to forgive them for the coalition, to be honest. So I can just see them standing still for another 10 years, if I'm being honest, just like what Willie Rennie done.
Yeah, and again, it was something we had a conversation with a couple of weeks back when they did well in the by-elections, and we looked at different seats in England and saw that they were actually, only a few points behind, a few, 1,000 votes behind, that they could actually take seats off the Tories. But again, England very different from Scotland, and that would need to be a very, probably divergent UK-wide approach unless they were really willing to work with Labour on a national basis. But again, I don't know if that appetite really is there in UK politics currently. But to go back to what we talked about, Freedom Day came yesterday in England. We saw videos on Sunday evening going into Monday morning of people queuing up to go to nightclubs. All restrictions have been dropped in England. Social distancing is gone. Mandatory mask wearing is gone. 50,000 cases a day. Patrick, what's your thoughts on this at this point in time as we see England completely open up?
I think the important point to make first off is that the people who are queuing up for nightclubs, as irresponsible as it might be, are following the rules and abiding by the law.
They're allowed to do it.
Ultimately, because they are following the rules and abiding by the law, it is people making those rules who are at fault for these super spreader events.
But it's the people making the rules that will blame the people going if we come to a point where there is an issue, because the folk going to nightclubs are only doing what they're allowed to do. Whether people agree or disagree with it, they're allowed to do it.
And you made the point about masks. What they're asking now is, I think they were planning a Freedom Day. Everyone would be double vaccinated and we can all do what we want. I think that was probably the plan back in March. And I think what's happened is we've not quite got the vaccines up to what we wanted. This is the UK government in England. And they are now backtracking and saying restrictions are eased. You do not need to wear a mask. but please use British common sense. Wear a mask if you think you should wear a mask. The chief medical officer even said he would use it in crowded places, especially inside. So they're trying to push this, it's the Conservative ideology of individualism. It's down to the individual to take responsibility for his or her life. When you live in a country of 60 million people and there's a virus that spreads very, very easily, individualism doesn't work. You have to work as a collective to defeat this sort of thing. I think it's going to be a disaster. I don't actually think there will be another lockdown. I think vaccines will start being rolled out and we'll just see a lot of cases, a spike in the number of cases, hundreds of deaths a day, and that number will slowly go down, and I think they're going to dig their heels in, and I think a lot of people will be suffering from long COVID for a long, long time because of this decision.
Yeah, and long COVID is something that health experts don't know a lot about. It is an issue in terms of restarting the NHS. We know how bad the waiting lists are for the common operations of knees and hips and whatever. People missing appointments for cancer. To restart the NHS, we need the best platform to do that with. And if you've got lots of people struggling with long COVID and breathing difficulties and everything else that brings, it puts more strain in the National Health Service. I am in agreement with you. I can't see another lockdown happening unless there is some kind of crazy quadrupled variant that spreads like wildfire. But new variants are likely as long as the vaccine can tackle it. But yes, I'm in agreement with you on that. Totally. But I think we will start to see cases continue to rise and pressure in England to put on the National Health Service, which I then don't think will lead to any lockdowns because the government will say the vaccine's there, it's working, it's breaking the chains. If you're in hospital, oh well, you're just unlucky and just get on with it type thing. Would you agree?
I think that probably will be the approach, yes. I mean, luckily, I don't know how accurate the statistics are, but Boris Johnson said in that text in October that only 4% of those in hospital are under 60. If that's true, that's quite good news because I think over 99% of over 60s have had both doses in both Scotland and England. So, I mean, that is good news. But what you will see is a lot of people getting cases, getting testing positive, cases soaring, and people getting long COVID. I mean, you know yourself, you're slightly more out of breath than what you were before you got the virus.
As well. Yep.
And there's a lot of people feeling extremely fatigued and they just don't feel the same. And these are people who got it over a year ago and they still don't feel the same. And, we still don't truly understand the virus. We still don't know how to combat long COVID. And I think it is extremely reckless of the government. But, I can't see there being another lockdown. And we can only hope and pray that people take their vaccine. You should take your vaccine. Everyone's been offered at least their first dose now. So everyone should take the vaccine to try and combat the recklessness of the government.
Yeah, I mean, it is there to be used and it is breaking the change, thankfully. But, even again, from last year's position till now, the reason clearly a lot of younger people weren't going into hospitals because they weren't getting COVID-19, whereas now they are. And if they've not been vaccinated, there is a worry there. And again, there's been that halting position. UK government, again, planning too much in advance, bought lots of AstraZeneca because it was made in Britain. It had been the Oxford vaccine, as it was called at first, and let's just buy lots of it. And of course, under 30s can't take it. So then there became that issue. We're trying to get Pfizer and Moderna to get that into the arms to younger people. It's probably why we've arrived at this point in time, a 3-week delay from the point that the Prime Minister originally said from Freedom Day to another Freedom Day, but yet not everybody's had a double dose, over 40, I don't think, in England. So that is a worry. But very interestingly, yesterday, 2 key points came out. One, people who suffer from respiratory health issues, I think I'm correct in saying, the possibility to wear armbands when they're walking about. I was baffled when I seen that. Baffled.
This is very interesting. I'm not quite sure how this made it onto the BBC because when you read the article, it says that it's not even the government. I think it's a 63-year-old man from Leeds who has suggested this online, and for whatever reason the BBC has decided to publish it. And obviously everyone was against it because it's so strikingly similar to a Nazi armband that you seen in the 1940s that nobody's going to go for this. The government aren't acknowledging it. So I think it was, it was mildly disturbing to see it, but I can't see it taking off. And I think it's quite a silly idea anyway.
Something we are going to see take off though is vaccine passports. It's something that we spoke about, and the very start of these episodes in May. Now we know that the UK government are definitely going to go ahead with vaccine passports. Do you think this is a right move? Because a lot of people have said, right, the vaccine shouldn't be mandatory, but yet there's still that argument from people like ourselves. I've been double jabbed. You've got your appointment for a second jab. That we've taken our vaccine. We don't really want to, have the benefits of opening the country up, but then mix with people who don't take the vaccine. But again, obviously, there's an argument for folk who maybe can't take a vaccine, but yet won't be allowed to go out.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't know what the answer is for people who can't take a vaccine. I think that's very complicated, and I think you need a medical or scientific professional to answer those questions. But on the vaccine passports at the end of September, no one is being forced to take a vaccine. They are simply being told that you cannot enter a nightclub unless you have both doses. In no way is the government forcing anyone to take a vaccine. They're just telling you what you can and can't do.
I think this will likely apply for football stadiums and concerts as well.
I think it would imagine probably as well.
Due to the size and the scale. I mean, if you think of Old Trafford, which is the largest club stadium in England, 75,000 people are going to bundle in there one day. I mean, that's just and even yesterday, I think it was Silverstone. Sorry, 2 days ago, Silverstone for the Grand Prix, there was 120,000 people there. So there needs to be a striking balance here between large crowds, which we want. Me and you, both football supporters, we want large crowds, we want full stadiums, but doing that in a safe way.
Yeah, exactly. And if for whatever reason you choose not to take a vaccine that has been administered to 3 billion people, which has near no side effects for the vast majority of people who take it, then that's up to you. But you cannot be expected the same freedoms as everyone else if you're going to be putting public health at risk. You can still go out for a walk, you can still go to the gym, you can still go out for dinner, you can still go to the pub, you can still go to your work, you can still go to the shops, you can probably even still go on holiday to most countries.
Probably,
but
yeah.
You can't be expected to go to these places that are tightly packed or there is a larger crowd, because you are putting public health at risk. And if you're to make that choice, then I'm afraid you're just going to have to sacrifice elements of your life. But they're not being forced.
Yep, Phillips came in on the comments. She should have seen the darts last night from Blackpool. Absolutely mental. But again, we all do want large-scale events. We've got a working vaccine. We're seeing that it works. It breaks the chains of transmission and hospitalisations. But there needs to be a balance here that when you can have large crowds, then, something like this probably is going to have to be the way forward in terms of managing large crowds in public health. Yes, so anything else you want to add in from Freedom Day that we've maybe not touched upon?
Just to encourage anyone listening to take your vaccine, wear a mask inside if there's either if it's quite a small place or it's quite a crowded place, just wear a mask, try and socially distance when you can, get your vaccine, and don't listen to the UK government, basically. Yeah,
well, you're putting a wee bit out, a wee plug for the channel. We're only a few subscribers away from hitting a big target, so if you haven't yet done so, please subscribe to A State of Mind on YouTube. We have got some cracking prizes being given away. There is a prize draw coming up the end of the month, I think we're 50k short of 13k, so if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to A State of Mind. And there is some cracking prizes. I think this prize is still the big Verve framed prize. So if you've not already done so, please subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot of great content coming off. I've got some great guests. You might have seen my tweet last night via Michael Stewart. Hopefully we'll get Michael in the programme. And we've compared to be a list of some guests to get back on. So hopefully we'll have some more guests to talk to in the coming weeks. So to allow us to do that, please get subscribing to the channel. All content's free on A State of Mind. And as I said, there are some great prizes to be given away. To move from England to Scotland, cases are falling, thankfully. We've saw a fall in cases, but yet, taking that move to level 0. How happy are you to be moving to level 0? Because obviously at first you made the step into level 3 before I did, I think. And then we basically then get stuck there at level, no, sorry, we're down to level 2, I think. Then after that, we basically get stuck there. So now down to level 0. Happy?
Yeah, I think we both went to level 3 in late April, and then in the middle of May, you stayed
That's
in
right.
level 3, and I was
That's
in
right.
level 2.
Yep,
And then in
that's
early
right.
June, we both stayed in
Yep,
level 2,
that's
and
right.
we've now moved to level 0 as of yesterday. So yeah, obviously delighted. You can stay in a hospitality venue until midnight. Social distancing outside is now completely gone. You do not need to social distance outside unless you're entering a football stadium. We'll come on to that in a minute.
I think you still to do it in the like pubs. If you're sitting outside, you're allowed 15 from 15 if you're sitting outside in a pub.
Right.
Or if you're, sitting outside a restaurant or whatever, I think there's still a limit on how many people you can still sit because it's still a hospitality venue. But I think, like, if you go to a park, you're allowed to meet as many people as you like, or a private garden or whatever, you're allowed to meet as many people as you like without having to actually distance from each other.
Right. And yeah, I'm not sure there is a big change in rules. It's pretty similar to level 1, but of course we never experienced level 1, did we?
No,
It's basically
no.
that social distancing outside is gone. Inside is down to 1 metre. We're seeing a lot of fans return to football stadiums. I think gigs will probably come back pretty soon as well.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, we're seeing 9,000 at Celtic Park tonight. We're going to see, I think it's 9,000 at Pittodrie on
Something like
Thursday,
that. Yep.
despite the fact that their stadiums get
Smaller
38,000 less
capacity.
seats.
Yep.
Yes. I think they are operating at about 35% and Celtic's at 15%.
Come on to that.
That's quite a large gap, quite a large discrepancy. And then Ibrox on Sunday, when they host Real Madrid, will have 33%. So it appears whoever's making the decision is just sort of picking numbers at random when it comes to football stadiums.
You sure it's 33% in Sunday at Ibrox?
I believe it's 17,000 and their
17,000.
capacity is about 52, so it's about
Right.
30 to 33%, yeah.
Okay.
And they expect to have full capacity by August the 10th for the Malmo / Helsinki game. I think they're basing that based off of the government projections for August the 9th being sort of Scotland's Freedom Day. Whether that comes to fruition and whether football stadiums are allowed to go back to full capacity is another matter, of course. But
it's 12,700 for the Real Madrid game, not 17,000.
Oh, maybe it was our first league game. I'm
It's our
thinking of
first
on the
league game.
31st of July.
Yep, which is the biggest number we're going to see for football in the country since last March. It's going to be 17,000, I think.
Yeah,
if I'm correct
I mean
in saying
that
so.
will still be level 0. So
Yep.
I know more people will be vaccinated by then, but whatever. Yes, good to see cases falling in Scotland. Obviously, more people getting their vaccine. It's quite incredible that we're still easing restrictions and cases are still going down after they sort of peaked a few weeks ago. I think that was largely down to Scotland fans going down to London. And
again, something that was so, Scotland fans getting the blame for this, but again, something they were allowed to do. And it was something that we were talking about earlier on in terms of nightclubs. For Scotland fans going to Wembley, there was no ban in place between, leaving Scotland and going to England or anywhere in England, or particularly going to London. So, again, in terms of messaging, I I find it baffling trying to blame football fans for that because they were allowed to do it. At the end of the day, that there wasn't any kind of ban in place. So I think, obviously, the press has used it as a throwaway comment. But if you don't want to have that increase, something should have been done surely then to stop it, shouldn't have?
Yeah, I think it's a mix between the Scottish government, the UK government, and the City of London, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. If they didn't want people to travel, they probably shouldn't have let people into the ground. They probably shouldn't have sold tickets. They should have refunded the Scotland fans. And it doesn't actually, I mean, I'm not sure what Sadiq Khan was really thinking, because he was saying Scotland fans don't come to London, and then within 2 weeks, 65,000 were in Wembley. And I know they're all from around the area, but 65,000 in Wembley, there's bound to be a couple of hundred people with COVID in that crowd.
Yeah,
so
there has been, and if you, but the scenes that we saw from, complete morons, frankly, breaking into the stadium and not having a ticket.
I'm sure they were
there was
delighted to see
nothing to
Italy
see.
win the trophy, though.
I'm sure they were delighted to see that. Yeah, I'm sure they all had a great night. But yeah, again, as you say, Patrick, in terms of planning as well, for that particular fixture, they knew they were going to get thousands of people coming. So why not set up fan zones that they could have done safely? You attended the fan zone in Glasgow and you said it was a safe experience. So why not set up a couple of those? Because they knew they were going to get the crowds that would come. I know there's an argument to say, oh yeah, but that'll encourage more people to come. I don't think it really would have, because I think for the majority of people going to London, they had already booked well in advance and nothing was moving them for love nor money.
Yeah, I agree. I think the problem with the fan zones is that this is actually partly UEFA's fault. Those fan zones that, when Ukraine played Sweden in the round of 16, the fan zones were empty because everyone knew. I mean, the Scottish fan zone, for example, the Glaswegian one, everyone knew that Scotland, even if they did get through, wouldn't be playing in that particular match. And even if they were, it was at Hampden.
Mm-hmm.
So the fan zone lay empty. And this is something that cost the government money, it cost the council money. So it was a safe experience. I'm not sure I'd pay for it again. The drinks weren't particularly enjoyable, but just a logistical nightmare. And again, I think the government needed to do more to either create more fan zones in London for a big crowd that they knew were coming, and make the fan zone in Glasgow Green slightly more enjoyable, because although it was safe, it was largely unused and it was largely a waste of money.
Yeah, especially for those fixtures, as you say, that Scotland weren't playing in and people weren't really going to have an interest in. So to go on, logistical nightmares, logistical errors, really, quite frankly. From that very point in the Euros, we saw a crowd of about 12,500 being allowed into Hampden Park and a stadium capacity of 52,000. That was in early June.
That was level 0 as well.
That was
level 2.
That was level 2. That's correct. I think a lot of the country was in level 1. The reasoning behind that from the Scottish Government, from what we've read, is because it was an event of national interest and there had been a lot of planning put into it. Of course, there's a lot of planning put into it, but you get that. But then, just at the weekend there in Scotland's largest football stadium, we saw a crowd of 2,000. Now, of course, that is the baseline figure for level 0. But to me, this just does not make sense that you have a blanket figure of 2,000 that ranges from a stadium of 60,000 at Celtic Park, the biggest football stadium, that then goes down to the very smallest in the league, which is, I think, somewhere in the range of about 5,000 or something. Just doesn't make sense, does it?
No, not at all. And I'm not quite sure. I think it's St Mirren that have the smallest capacity.
Probably 8,000.
Yeah, I was going to say about 10, but
Park, something like that.
A baseline of 2,000 means that you're getting a 20% capacity. 2,000 for Preston North End. It was level 1, but it was still the baseline. 2,000 in a 60,000 capacity stadium. What's that? About 3% or something.
Yeah, well,
maths isn't what it was.
30 times 2 is 60, so it's roughly 3%.
So, I mean, picking a number instead of a percentage doesn't make any sense.
No.
Whether it's, if it's of national importance, then just admit that you're not driven by data or public health. I mean, if you're willing to, you're going from 3% in Celtic Park, or should I say, you're going from 20% in Hampden to 3% in Celtic Park. So you're willing to take 7 times the risk because it's of national importance. You're willing to risk public health and ignore the data 7 times as much because it's of national importance. I mean, as a study was conducted in 2018, showed that Celtic contribute £2 billion to the economy every year, and that's not fans buying season tickets. That's fans taking public transport, going into the pub, getting a pie, going into the stadium, buying another pie in the stadium.
Restaurants, shops, everything round it, going into town before games and whatever
buying
else.
Buying a magazine, fans coming from Ireland to watch games, fans from abroad coming to watch us in Europe. You could argue that the game tonight is of national importance. A Scottish team playing in the biggest European competition, 6 games away from playing in the group stage of the biggest European competition. It's a massive financial boost, and I would argue it is of national importance to have football teams playing at the top level from Scotland. But even if it isn't national importance, I mean, Pittodrie, I think they're getting 9,000 in a 23,000 capacity stadium. That's something like 30 to 40%. Celtic are getting 15% tonight. How many did you say were going to see the Real Madrid game?
12,750.
12,000, so that's what, about 20 to 25% for Rangers.
Like
it's then going to go up to 33%.
It's less than 25%. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, whoever is making these decisions, I know it's different councils, but I mean, I think they're all cooperating with the Scottish Government and people like Jason Leach. They seem to be picking numbers out of nowhere, and I'd love to know what it was based on.
Yeah, I think a lot of football fans would just like clear, concise transparency in this, and tell us why these decisions are made. I mean, Michael's came in the comments saying Scotland would not have hosted any games at the Euros unless they could guarantee a certain level of crowd. To lose games at Hampden would not have looked good for the Scottish Government. No other reason. There probably was part of that within the reason of actually doing it, but we'd just rather they come out and tell us that was the reason why those games went ahead, because this whole national interest idea thing, okay, that's the reason, fine, but come out and tell us that and be clear and tell us why that is the reason. As you say, the Scottish clubs playing in Europe, in the European competition this week, surely those events are national interest because they bring focus to Scotland and they rejuvenate money within the league, because if they obviously qualify for the tournament, money is then shared out between clubs. So surely, there has to be a consistency in this, and there just isn't consistency. And I think that's the frustration from everybody. You've dropped out, you'll come back, but it is the frustration for everybody because we're going to see a crowd on Saturday at Ibrox, which is going to be less than the crowd as Sunday at Ibrox, which doesn't really make any sense at all. Again, that goes back to Tuesday. I'm just saying there, on Saturday, Rangers are going to get less of a crowd than they will on the Sunday, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, that really is one of the most baffling things. What a lot of difference are they going to make? I think they go from 8,000 on Saturday to 12 on Sunday. Where does that come from? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Does it make any sense to you? And tonight, again, also, Celtic Park is going to have 9,000 people within it in a 60,000-seater stadium, compared to Rangers, who are going to have less than that on Saturday, obviously in a smaller stadium. But again, something I've noticed with the two clubs is, from what I've read, is it's mandatory if you go to Ibrox. The reason why we're talking about the two clubs here is, the two biggest stadiums in the country, that if you go to Ibrox, you must present a negative lateral flow test. But at Celtic Park, it's optional. Do you think this could be something, the reason of why this is happening here?
Well, possibly, but even if that were true,
be transparent and say,
be transparent. That's the club and the government. But also, Pittodrie is getting a bigger capacity than Ibrox. So I mean, what if Ibrox is getting more fans in because they're being more stringent with testing than Celtic are? How strict are Aberdeen? Do you need to take a negative PCR test before getting into Pittodrie?
I don't know the rules surrounding Pittodrie.
Even if it is a negative PCR test, if everyone's tested negative, why aren't you having 100% capacity? I mean, the rules, they just don't make sense. And it'll be interesting to see what capacity Celtic get for West Ham on Saturday, because the ballot has to be done for that awfully quickly. And it'd be very, very interesting. And I think it would be pretty stunning, actually, if we were to go from around 9,000 spectators tonight back down to 2,000 again for a friendly 3 days or 4 days later.
Yeah, that would make no sense. Even if they got to 10,000, people would still be saying, but the next year you're going to have 12,000 in a smaller stadium. So where does that come from? Again, won't push too much our football team's narrative on this, but there's a question as to whether, I've seen one club challenging the government on it. Are Celtic doing that, or they just can accept what they're given? I hope not, because as you say, you can't go from 9,000 tonight inside Celtic Park to anything lower than that on Saturday. It would just be completely baffling. Another comment coming in from Michael, which is quite interesting, saying it seems a bit of politicising. Could there be a bit of politicising in this? We're just trying to look between this, but again, Aberdeen, a Tory council, their party has created Freedom Day in England. They want to drop restrictions a lot quicker. Douglas Ross has been somebody that's been pushing that. Do you think we could have seen a wee bit of politicising in Aberdeen, or do you think it's just the case that they've just went, okay, go for it, because obviously the government at the end of the day make the final decision on this? Or is it that, Glasgow City Council, for both clubs that play in Glasgow, are just being very strict on it, and the government's still signing it off and just leaving it up to them to make the case?
I think it's difficult to tell.
It's very difficult to
I
tell.
don't think Aberdeen is a majority Tory council, so they would have to get votes from other parties to pass something like that. In the same way that Glasgow isn't a majority SNP council. I don't think there are any majority councils actually in Scotland. I'm not entirely sure on that though. But it could be politicising. I think it's quite clear that the Tories want to unlock faster.
Yes.
But even in sort of SNP minority councils, you're having 15% in Celtic Park, but 33% down the road in Govan a week later. And then in North Lanarkshire, which is a Labour-Tory coalition, you're having 2,000 out of, I think, 13.5, which I think the maths on that is about 20%. So again, just sort of picking numbers at random. I would love to know what the thinking is. I think leaving it down to councils makes it more confusing because, if one council wants to be more strict than the other, then their fans are punished for that. Motherwell's fans might be punished for that. Hibs' fans might be punished by Edinburgh City Council, who knows. I think it should be a government decision, considering how large these events can be. I mean, I think the rugby would come down to a government decision. I don't think that would be left to Edinburgh City Council. So 60,000 in Celtic Park every single week, I think, and 54,000 or whatever it is in Ibrox every single week should be a government decision, and there should be consistency right across Scotland, because why leave it down to the council if every council's on the same level? Because, if the argument goes that, cases might be higher in one part of the country than the other, then surely that part of the country should be on a different level. But we're all on level 0.
Yeah. As you say, it will be interesting to see what happens. I find it quite interesting that the Rangers have obviously published 3 games in a row, whereas Celtic seem to be one of the clubs that are just doing it one by one by one. Don't get that at all. Whether that changes, I don't know, but we'll just need to wait and see what happens. To get away from football, well, actually, we'll stay in football a wee bit. The England team snubbed a visit to 10 Downing Street. Now, I would imagine there's a lot of feeling, especially in guys like Marcus Rashford, after what they received after the penalty shootout of the abhorrent, disgusting abuse that they received. This was a government that, I don't want to say they encouraged it, but they didn't help the situation at all, did they? With, everything surrounding Black Lives Matter and taking the knee within the Euros.
They did not. I mean, Keir Starmer, to his credit, quoted Boris Johnson back to him, saying early in June, it's totally up to people to boo taking the knee if they want. This again comes back to personal responsibility. It's up to the individual. That's a conservative way of thinking. But he's now backtracking on that after the racist abuse that was suffered by the 3 players, the 3 penalty takers, the 3 penalty missers. I think it first came out 2 days later that a plan to have the players in Downing Street was cancelled, and the way that they worded it, it was framed as if the government had cancelled it, when in actual fact the players turned it down, which was pretty good reporting for whoever found that out. But you seen Priti Patel as well saying on the 14th of June it's gesture politics to be taking the knee, and fans are okay to boo it. She then tweets saying that racist abuse is abhorrent on the same day that she's deporting people who have lived here for over 50 years to their so-called home countries because they are allegedly of no value to the British economy. And then you have Tyrone Mings getting 500,000 likes for calling it out, and quite right to him, because I think that's what the government don't want. People who grew up working class, made it as a footballer, they've now made a bit of money, but they still have their morals intact, and they can call out the government. And 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, people are going to take the footballer's side because they adore the footballer. The footballer is the guy who makes them feel great at the weekend, who is working class, but still, they have no motive politically. They're just there to call out what they see.
Yeah, and the stuff suffered by Marcus Rashford after everything, particularly he's done in the past year to improve people's lives, and that is what he's done. I know he plays for Manchester United and he's one of the big stars, but he's helped people, he's improved people's lives and did something to help humanity. So, for him to suffer that, and then, the cheek for Downing Street to then invite them down as if everything's good, well done, lads, as a joke, quite frankly. Remaining in Downing Street, meeting with the Tory party, we saw not the current Prime Minister, but another former leader of the Scottish Tories, take up her seat as she's hightailed it to London today. Ruth Davidson, unaccountable to the people of Scotland. How did you feel when you saw Ruth putting on her regalia today, Patrick, in the unelected House of Peers?
Well, it has been coming for a year now, hasn't it? She's certainly taken a lot of slack, and rightly so, for accepting a position in the second largest unelected legislative chamber in the world, second only to China, which says quite a lot. It's absolutely staggering that people call this country the oldest democracy in the world, the mother of all parliaments, when we are the only country out of all the European Union countries to still use first past the post, which means we have a government with 55% of the seats on only 43% of the vote. And that's a democratic chamber. You have this other chamber, the upper chamber, that can veto government bills or private members' bills with its 800 unelected members, its 100 lifetime peerages, hereditary peers, bishops of the Church of England.
One of only 3 countries in the world, democratic countries in the world, that still has a link to religion within government as well. I think the only other 2 are the Vatican and Iran is the only other 2 countries that have that.
I never knew that. There you go. Everyone knows the story. I think everyone apart from the Tory party want to get rid of the House of Lords. Whether Starmer as Prime Minister would get rid of the House of Lords, I highly doubt. But I think probably the best way to get rid of the House of Lords is for Scotland to become independent.
Most likely is. Just before we close, we have seen 2 rockets, and I don't mean the actual planes taking them. I mean Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson going into space. As people line the seats in this country, people go hungry in this country. These 2 men could conquer world UK hunger, particularly very, very quickly, but yet they decide to go on a trip. In terms of an image and a point that this is send out, it's just complete greed capitalism at its very base, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a total waste of money, if we're being honest. This is the same Richard Branson who asked the government for £500 million to bail out Virgin Atlantic, the train line company, at the start of the... Sorry, not the train line, the aeroplanes.
Planes.
Aye, at the start of the pandemic.
He owns that much, it's easy to get confused, mate, don't worry.
Aye. So he was wanting bailed out for his plane company to the tune of £500 million. He's then spent £1.5 billion to go into space. So he's got plenty of money. I think he actually did get that bailout in the end, which is an absolute disgrace.
Because he probably funds the political party that gave him the bailout.
Yeah, so. No doubt. And then you've seen Jeff Bezos, by far and away the richest man on planet Earth, probably spending a similar amount to take his rocket to space. And I suppose you could say that Richard Branson won the billionaire space race because he got there first. He only got there a few days beforehand. But an absolute waste of money. It's ridiculous that these people can even be billionaires when there's such poverty right around the globe, never mind in Britain. Just scunnered, I think is the word.
Yeah. Owen McGrandles just came in as well as the £500 million bailout to try to also Richard Branson through the NHS for £82 million. I think it just completely, signifies greed, wealthy capitalism, at its very best, that we can do whatever we like and just, our fingers, middle finger right up to the rest of you. I'll do whatever I want. So yeah, it's obviously made the news and it's been big because it's something that's going to take interest because everybody knows the 2 figures, but total disgrace, quite frankly, especially as we're talking, we go from somebody like Marcus Rashford who's trying to feed hungry school children to then, a billionaire Richard Branson, launching his sail into space. some contrast. Some contrast. We shall probably leave it there for today. Unless you've got anything else to add, Patrick.
Just before we wrap up, I think I mentioned earlier how Labour have only got 1 month's payroll left in the bank. They have laid off 90 permanent staff members and hired at least 30 temporary staff members. And I think their main or sole job is to investigate their own party members for being too left-wing, and just sort of looking to kick out even more members, even more people who pay them £3 a month, £36 a year to be a member of a party that has basically no policies at the minute. I remember a Dennis Skinner speech saying that Kinnock couldn't get rid of the debt, Blair couldn't get rid of the debt, Corbyn did get rid of the debt, Labour Party were in debt for decades, and Jeremy Corbyn get rid of it, and within 18 months Starmer has taken them right back into debt and has half the membership, at least half the membership. And just quickly on Starmer, Laura Kusenberg done another special before her special tonight with Dominic Cummings with Keir Starmer in Blackpool. He was meeting ex-Labour voters. These aren't people who voted Labour in 2015. These are people who voted Labour in 1997 and 2010. And, particularly the guy that voted Labour in 1997, the fact that was the last time he voted Labour means that he probably voted for people like William Hague. I mean, who voted for William Hague? It's absolutely incredible. And then there was, I can't even remember his name, in 2005, the Brexiteer. David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson. I mean, how Boris Johnson, how Keir Starmer appeals to these sorts of people, I don't know.
How can you go from appealing to somebody that can vote for Boris Johnson to then vote for the Labour Party? It's not a catchment. I think Labour need to come to it. They're not going to pull those people back in.
And it's incredible. I mean, the 2 points I would like to make is basically, I'm not sure what coalition they're going for here, what coalition of voters, because they have to get over 40% of the vote, which means they need to get 10% of the electorate, 10% more of the electorate from what they already have at the moment. Secondly, what happened to political parties and political leaders just sort of standing on what they believe? I mean, me and you are sympathetic to the SNP. The SNP stood for decades on independence for Scotland and got nowhere. They never tried to position themselves differently in order to win more votes. They always stood on independence. If Keir Starmer believes in a redistribution of wealth, higher taxes for the wealthy, renationalising the rail service, he should just say that. And if he loses an election, he loses an election. But at least he's standing on a platform that he believes in.
Yeah, and something that voters and the electorate can believe in. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully next week we're back with a guest. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in again today. Once again, just to remind you, we are 50 subscribers short of 13,000. There are some great prizes going to be on the go in the next couple of months. So please get subscribing if you haven't already done so to A State of Mind. That will help us get more guests on. We should be with a guest next week. But of course, all the content is free. That's all I've got to say. So thank you everybody for joining myself and Patrick McGilp on The State of Politics. Cheers.